Niin, nyt saimme Botanica-aisi aloitetut parkiosa läpi ja nyt me tulimme siis Sydney Opera Housen alla. Ja nyt meillä alkaa se kohdassa tuuri. Mä en näytä eläimille. Lämme siinä ottamme järjekodassa.
One of the most famous buildings of the 20th century, Danish design building, mid 20th century, now under renovation. People, the indigenous people who have been living here for many, many thousands of years, prior to English colonial settlement, the valley here was used as a place for dancing and story. Strong influences which Jørgensen had studied under, the works of Alva and at the Brussels Expo, it's all very modern and minimalist. So Uetsen's taken that on board, but then with the roofs, they're a complete explosion. And this is expressionism. Uetsen in his competition had presented freehand sketches, and these were developed into three-dimensional models from the late 1950s to the early 1960s, and they were ellipses and parabolas. And he expected it to be constructed out of a poured skin of concrete. So putting in a scaffold and a metal mesh, pouring the concrete in. Maybe it could be done in sections off site and put together, but there was no evenness to any curve within it. It took a long time to work out the key to this structural shape. And the geometry comes out of a small part of a larger sphere. So just one small section, radius is the centre point to all of this, and a diameter of 78 metres. So as long as that radius was always the same, the curvature, no matter where these were placed within that surface, would always be the same. So the geometry precast on site, 2,200 ribs of concrete, just 14 different sizes. But the support for these massive roofs begins down in Benelong Point. The steel cables are anchored in bedrock below sea level. So after the initial delay in getting the base started, before they could build the roofs, they realised what they designed to build was going to be too heavy for the base. So they had to go down through the base, back into those initial reinforced structures and go further into the rock. So that was another hold-up. So they had to strengthen the base in underneath. Cables come up through the new columns, fanning out those base cables. So the base of a roof here is poured in situ, and it separates out the base cables. You can see the first row of ribs coming above. The second row of ribs above. And inside the ribs are conduits which contain the steel cables. So it's a multi-strand thick cable, about the thickness of your arm. It's all galvanised steel, and they're pre-stressed post-tension ribs of concrete. So the steel cables are all locked together, and the cabling is coming through down into the space, tensioning down, going up with more ribs, re-tensioning back into place. So concrete works very well under compression. 25,000 tonnes of weight compressed into a point. So massive engineering. The building won all of its awards immediately for engineering, not architecture. It's it's regarded as one of the engineering ones. So an experiment in concrete engineering, internationally famous but controversial. Over time, over budget, empty, change of government and change of architect in the mid-60s. Political parties and opposition government won power largely on the promise to finish the building quickly and stop this ridiculous cost blower. But they took another 7 years and spent twice as much. So it ended up being a 16-year project. And we ended up opening 1973. So in this time frame, by 1969, Concorde was flying, man had landed on the moon, and we hadn't finished building the interiors of our theatres. And by the time we finally opened in 1973, Apollo had put 5 missions onto the moon. And by that stage, I think Concorde was finally flying into New York in 1973. So this building spanned all of that period. But it did achieve some amazing things. This is one of the first buildings using a computer to process this. Hornibrook was the structural engineers here in Australia, and they employed Joe Bertoni. I don't know if any of you are studying architecture, you seem to know a few of the names. Joe Bertoni was at maths, and this project had access to that computer for only 1 day a week on a Sunday. So all of Joe Bertoni's hand calculations were all double checked. There's something like 30,000 calculations, step by step by step, were all eventually processed. And were able to check them at the end of the week, and he got every single one of them right, apparently. So he was a maths genius anyway. And what he developed was the crane technology which enabled these roof ribs to be hoisted up with huge cranes, and rather than having any scaffolding inside here, there was just one single crane, like a cradle. So the crane could lower in the rib, and then the cradle would then position it into place, then it'd be locked in, and then the cradle would be moved away. So all of that technology was new. Now you can build buildings much more quickly, much more lightweight as well. Let's step out over this way. Sweden, shipped to Australia. 1,056,000 square tiles shipped out. And there's slabs. So inside the structure is the precast roofs, 2,200 of them. Outside there's 4,200 different slabs, and they contain the tiles, but they were precast on ground level, and then driveway underneath that monumental staircase. So that became another cool site, factory area, and all the tiles were placed by hand down in the wall, and then concrete poured in, so they're cemented in, and then all the slabs go up and they all lock together. They're sitting on these brass pins which lock into the interior structure. They're triple glazed non-porous ceramic. They're virtually porcelain, so the range washes the roof clean. So pretty much most of the roof was covered with the roof tiles by the time it's left the project. And they realised that the concept from the beginning in the competition, multi-purpose theatres were doing very well. What they were designing and building was a large Grand Opera Ballet concert hall and a slightly smaller one. From working for Utzon to working with Arup. It had moved from Australia to London, I think he called him a lot, and he got married in London and worked for Arup. So he's the only one of the team who worked for both Arup, the engineers, and the architect. But under the new government, Utzon's team was out, and there was a New South Wales government architect in charge. And Utzon was offered a position of just being chief design consultant within the team of government architects to take over this project. And Utzon found that unworkable and resigned. The new chief architect, Peter Hall, really wasn't happy with that. He was lobbying to try and keep Utzon on board as the chief architect. It was a real dilemma, but Utzon didn't return. And what Utzon had been working on was the interior theatres. And some of the staging had been delivered, and it was to be a Grand Opera Ballet concert stage and a medium one. But to get these performances to happen, everything has to come up from underneath. The backstage is all on ground. So underneath on that side was a grand storage area for scenery and dressing rooms, bringing everything up. Same but slightly smaller on this side. But the government addressed this acoustic problem that multi-acoustics don't really please any company. So they allocated a large set of rooms for concerts and this one for opera. And that improves the acoustics and the experience. But they were always going to be narrow and tight. These theatres have to fit inside these defined concrete structures which are unmovable. So they're quite tight in some places. Utzon's vision initially was that you'd be able to see the separation between the two buildings, but they had to maximise the seating they had within it, within this limited space. So you can see at some points it's even touching. So the audience really doesn't get much of a sense of that separation. Utzon's initial vision wanted you to see quite clearly the building in the building. But there's only a few points where you can pick that idea up. Let's head through here. Back into the base. Any questions about this? Access has always been an issue because of the amount of stairs. To get audience into this theatre who couldn't climb stairs, they had to come in a little elevator here and we could put them into the front of the theatre. They could never get up to the top of the stairs or see the harbour view from the top. So as part of renovations a few years ago when this theatre was closed, corridor was cut through this way to put in a new elevator, and they're doing the same on the other side now, on the concert hall side, and it'll be ready in another 2 years' time. So we're going to walk down through this new corridor. To dress the exterior. So this is the use of the same timber as we were standing outside a minute ago, but they're just using different surfaces. This is a clearer estopole. You can see the true colouring where there's a different kind of stain on it before. So there's a very simple palette of materials that have been used. It's the same granite, the same timber, and the concrete left exposed, very raw and simple. Cutting through the concrete here. Eric, the engineers, are involved in all of these alterations. This is some furniture we've just recently had commissioned. It's all just been designed and built for us, and it's using that same boxwood. It's a New South Wales box hardwood, same on the walls. And we can pick up to the glass floor out here. We can get some good harbour views and photographs. Sections of that there. So there's actually a tie beam cut through this way to pull these. So these are still part of that.
How do you support it then?
I don't know. I think they put a tie beam across in here, pull that section together. There's a couple of places where they have to cut it. But these are the only two places where they're doing that. This side and the other side now. But it's not holding a massive weight in this section. There's only about like 3 beams.
Okay.
Then pulled together anyway. Utzon always wanted that strong visual connection to the harbour, water on 3 sides of the building, intermission drinks with a harbour view, placing his 2 theatres side by side on the conditioning plus up in the rooms above the theatres. All the air conditioning in there is now being taken out. New air conditioning going into the concert hall. All of this renovation work. This particular program is called the Decade of Renewal, but it's actually been 2 decades long so far. These renovations began 1999. Mr. Utzon came back on board as architect at the age of 81 to design the renovations for us. He spent the last 9 years of his life designing renovations, but didn't return to Australia. He did the work from Denmark. He was in his 80s. He said he felt the distance was too far to do the travelling, and his eldest son is an architect overseeing the renovation program. All of the glass above us here is original, it's all stained. With Utzon back on board as architect, the Opera House was given UNESCO World Heritage listing, which gives it a protection order, which means there are limitations and restrictions of what can and can't be done within this renovation program. And this cutting through these elevators here is the only structural part, structural alteration. The interiors are not Mr. Utzon's, and they don't fall into this World Heritage listing. There are still some restrictions on it, but the exterior is the famous part of it. So the glass is original. It came in last in the building project, so it's Utzon's concept, but it's not his design. So Peter Hall, the Australian architect taking over, had to work with Utzon's concepts. And Mr. Utzon saw this as like a waterfall effect, and the engineers have given it this aerodynamic shape to cope with strong winds. And it's a ball and socket joint construction which gives the flexibility. It's all suspended from the roof at the top, so it just drops and juts out. By today's standards, this is all massively over-engineered and overbuilt. And they're absolutely clean. Any questions?
Does it leak any water? This?
Oh, there are a few leaks here and there.
How much were the total cost?
Sorry.
Total cost.
The total cost? It finished at 20 times the original estimate, at 100, just over 100 million. In today's dollar, it puts it well over 2 billion. So it became one of the most famous buildings from the 20th century, but also one of the most expensive. Glass is original, it's all from France. François Souchon Nouvecel, company in Lyon. 6,000 square metres. For this century, just had a version of this before. But his interiors were going to be colourful. So it's a wooden theatre. Part plywood ceiling and wall. This New South Wales boxwood is used for the floor. These hard timbers gives the bright acoustic sound for the opera voice. The shape of the ceiling is a bit like the roof of the mouth, so it's spreading sound quickly and evenly around. Traditional proscenium arch. Above the stage would be the fly tower for scenery. The orchestra pit at the moment is covered over. They've had some events on the stage where they haven't needed the orchestra pit, but that cover comes off. You've got the orchestra tucked in underneath. But this is only medium size. The competition had asked for 3,000 seats here. It came in at just 1,500. The larger set of rooms next door ended up just a concert stage, 2,500 seats. And with the concert stage next door, there are seats behind the stage for a choir. So it doesn't have all the proscenium arch, the scenery above. It's just simply a wooden concert platform next door for an orchestra. And the ceiling of the concert hall is a soft plywood. So it gives the mellow tone for symphony next door, and this is a bright acoustic floor for opera voice. Central seating through the middle would be premium, and the further to the side and the back you go, the cheaper they become. So a very restricted view over there on the edge. So it depends where you're sitting as to how much you pay.
Kasit. Siinä on hakkeen ja...
Lift it up with a machine that can lock into those little screw holes, lift the whole slab up. Renovation, a reception room, was completed and opened in 2004. Reception room, renamed the Utzon room. You can take a photograph from here. they're cleaning. Hello. They have to mop the floor. This is a hardwood. Just mind where they're got it wet here. This is a Tasmanian blue gum. It's a hardwood. Prior to the renovation, as the reception room, this had a carpeted floor, timber panelling on the ceiling and the walls. Now it's all been stripped. And you may want to just step out this way and take a photograph because Utzon designed this tapestry for this room. It's an abstract design, expressive of music. He was listening to the music of Bach, so it's all about rhythm. Woven in the Australian Tapestry Workshop out of Melbourne. So Utzon's tapestry in wool gives the room the acoustic sound absorbency factor it needs. So with the completion of this room, 2004, it gave us our first Utzon true interior. In 2007, the Opera House was given UNESCO World Heritage Protection, and 2008, Utzon died at the age of 90. But all of the renovations continue. So kitchens are underneath, popular rooms for parties, recitals, business meetings.
Mis sulle meeldib siiamaani?
So on the panorama here we have some of Utzon's original design sketches. Just these curved ellipses, just a concept and an ideas for the shapes. This is what won him the competition. They started construction with that chord engineered base. The top side, where we're standing, is the reverse of the underside. So it's just folding and lifting itself. This is the orchestra kit from the concert hall, the Jones Sullivan stage. Just come through. So we were sitting up in here, and that's where the stage is with all the lifts coming through to the backstage area. Here we can see the pre-casting of the ribs on site. And they'll start to be hoisted up and then assembled to create the roofs. All the tile slabs up on the roof, all that driveway.
So was the curvature of the slabs done on the ground, or was it put on the roof and then the curvature came?
No, it was all pre-done by the hand mathematics to get the curve right in the first place.
Okay.
So this is the roof rift going up. That's the underside, and the roof tile slab will be on the top. Base and roofs. Utzon standing on site. No hard helmets anywhere in sight there. Don't worry about safety with that. And these are all the tiles going up. This is about the time of the change of government and the new Chief Minister for Public Works and the new architect Peter Hall coming in.
Thank you.
So I hope you all now have a good idea what the building is all about and have enjoyed the tour. I'd like to thank you very much for visiting. We've got a gift shop here, the Seaman office is open upstairs.